This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thank you so much for joining us this Monday, April 5th, 2021. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, fallout in Georgia over Major League Baseball's decision to pull the All-Star game out of the state because of its new voting law. But does that law actually do what its critics say? Turmoil in the Middle East, Israel facing deep political divisions with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on trial, and now a political coup reportedly attempted in the key Israeli ally, Jordan. As America experiences a time of racial division, one group is trying to bring unity by planting churches in minority communities. And as much of the world has just celebrated the resurrection of Jesus Christ, some argue there never was a Jesus. We're going to hear from two men who've spent decades proving that he was indeed real. All those stories and more ahead in today's edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to begin this half hour with the fallout from Major League Baseball's decision to pull this year's All-Star game out of Georgia in protest over the state's new voting rights law. Critics claim it restricts voting access, but Georgia leaders say otherwise and argue businesses are being pressured by left-wing activists.
And should know what this decision means. It means cancel culture and partisan activists are coming for your business.
If you support the constitutional rights of all Americans, we should be making it easier to vote, not harder.
Despite claims by many in the media, analysts from different parts of the political spectrum say the new law actually increases voter access. One analysis by Georgia Public Broadcasting says the bill expands early voting for most counties. The Washington Post fact checker gave President Biden its worst rating for Pinocchios for claiming the bill ends voting early so people can't vote if they're working. The Cobb County Travel and Tourism Bureau has estimated baseball's decision to move the All-Star game could cost the county more than $100 million. Turning now to Washington, Republicans are pushing back against the White House's massive new infrastructure bill, saying it is loaded with a lot of things that have nothing to do with infrastructure. And some Democrats are against it because they say it doesn't spend enough. Adele Hurd is on this story.
The White House may call it an infrastructure bill, but to Republicans, it's a goodie bag of left-wing spending. And Republican Senator Roy Blunt says only about $615 billion of Biden's $2 trillion plan actually goes for infrastructure improvements.
There's more in the package, George, for charging stations for electric vehicles, $174 billion, than there is for roads, bridges, and airports.
The bill includes $213 billion for so-called sustainable and affordable housing, $400 billion to expand home or community-based care for seniors and people with disabilities, and $174 billion for programs to build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle chargers by 2030.
We're going to have auto workers, union auto workers, I hope, making cars one way or the other. Why not have them leading the revolution into electric vehicles, which, by the way, there is a very hot competition for?
Blunt said if the administration could have kept the bill focused on infrastructure needs, it would have sailed through Congress with bipartisan approval. But Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm indicated to CNN the White House is willing to pass the bill without Republican support, raising the possibility of using a budgetary maneuver that limits the amount of votes needed to pass, meaning Vice President Kamala Harris might once again cast the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. In addition to the wasteful spending is the means to pay for it. A hike in the corporate income tax from 21% to 28%, and an increase in taxes on companies' foreign earnings.
Corporations, we all know, have not been paying their fair share.
But after Donald Trump pushed American companies to return their factories to the U.S., Republicans are worried the tax hike will encourage corporations to leave again, taking jobs with them.
We go back to the first or second highest corporate tax in the world, which works to our disadvantage.
And some Democrats don't like the bill either because it will hurt business or doesn't spend enough on their favorite left-wing causes. Bernie Sanders wants more money for climate change and student debt. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says the last thing the economy needs right now is a big whopping tax increase on all of the productive sectors of our economy. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Turning now to Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's corruption trial resumed in Jerusalem today, with judges hearing evidence for the first time and Netanyahu appearing in court. He entered a plea of not guilty to the charges back in February and calls the charges against him a witch hunt. The evidence phase of the trial began today, and Israel's political parties met with the country's president to discuss who should form the next government, after last month's elections produced no clear verdict. Today, a former right-wing ally of Netanyahu, Naftali Bennett, was nominated to form a new government, deepening the political divisions in Israel even further. Also in the Middle East, King Abdullah of Jordan put down a possible coup against his rule. As Chris Mitchell reports now from Jerusalem, the possible overthrow of the king represents a threat to a key U.S. and Israeli ally in the Middle East.
On Sunday, Jordan's foreign minister accused the country's former crown prince, Prince Hamza, of conspiring with foreign elements in a nefarious plot.
Investigations monitored interventions and communications that include communications with foreign parties about the best time to start steps to destabilize Jordan.
Jordanian security forces arrested more than a dozen they say were involved in the plot and placed Prince Hamza under house arrest. He released a video claiming his innocence.
The attempts to claim conspiracies and foreign backing and so on and so forth have been seen in this region and in this country, unfortunately, recently, over and over and over again, and they are a tool of tyranny.
Faced with competing narratives, the U.S., Israel, and many Gulf Arab states stood behind Jordan's King Abdullah. The State Department said King Abdullah is a key partner of the United States, and he has our full support. Israel's Defense Minister Benny Gantz said a strong, thriving Jordan is in Israeli security and economic interest, and we need to do everything we can to assist them. The U.S., Israel, and Western powers consider Jordan's King Abdullah a major strategic ally. The U.S. has provided substantial military assistance to the king, and about 3,000 American troops are based in the Hashemite kingdom. If the king fell, it would be a blow to stability in the region. For now, the situation is stable, but some say it's a wake-up call that the monarchy of Jordan may be at risk in the future. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, President Biden's Secretary of State making major changes in America's foreign policy on issues of great importance to Christians and cultural conservatives. We're going to talk with Dan Andros of FaithWire.com about what those changes will mean for international religious freedom when we come back. Please stay with us.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Wednesday at 3 on the CBN News Channel. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
Welcome back. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said last week he is making major changes in American foreign policy on some key issues of interest to cultural conservatives and Christians. And the Biden administration will be taking a very different approach from President Donald Trump's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Here to tell us what's coming is Dan Andros of FaithWire.com. So, Dan, what is Blinken going to focus on during the Biden administration that is such a big change from Mike Pompeo?
Yeah, well, Blinken did announce formally last week, Ephraim, that the Biden administration will have that sharp shift in focus. They said they'd be restructuring America's top priorities around the globe. And at the heart of this shift is the issues of abortion and LGBTQ activism. Though Blinken and the media kind of framed it as a, quote, return to focusing on human rights. That's how they couch the argument. But Blinken also indicated that the Biden administration feels that the Trump administration's focus on, quote, religious liberty is what exacerbated what they believe were human rights violations against women and LGBTQ persons. So that's the fundamental shift, and one that seeks to truly expand what universal human rights are, and that's kind of what's at the heart of the debate.
Did former Secretary of State Pompeo see this coming ahead of time?
Yeah, he did. He released a report back in 2020 called the Report of the Commission of Unalienable Rights. And so basically what the report did was seek to define what unalienable rights actually are. And that report was met with criticism from progressives. And I want to read you just a key quote from Pompeo in that report. And he said, after the Cold War ended, many human rights advocates turned their energy to new categories of rights. These rights often sound noble and just, but when politicians and bureaucrats create new rights, they blur the distinction between unalienable rights and ad hoc rights granted by the government.
So how will this play out in practice? What will Blinken's administration be doing?
Yeah, well, one tangible example, Ephraim, of what you could see happen in the new administration is, one of President Trump's first acts in office was to sign a presidential memorandum reinstating the Mexico policy, which basically banned the U.S. From funding any group that promotes the abortion around the globe, an international abortion. So under the Biden administration, they'd potentially take that away. Because they, as they said, label things as reproductive rights. They've labeled that a right under this new way of thinking, and so they want to reinstate potentially abortion internationally, and potentially have U.S. groups fund that abortion internationally.
So shifting gears here, what's coming up on FaithWire tonight?
Yeah, we're going to be taking a look at discerning poser Christianity, and so I mean, there's a lot of wolves in sheep clothing these days, and so we're going to provide some keys in how you help identify that and what you should be doing as a Christian to make sure that you're staying on the path that God wants you on.
All right, Dan, thank you so much. I want to remind you at home that you can watch FaithWire on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. Still ahead, as America goes through a difficult time with racial divisions right now, one group is trying to bring unity by starting new churches in minority communities. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. Stay with us.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel. Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears. Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com to get your copy today. Your news channel, your shows, the stories you care about. Anytime you want, anywhere you want. Download the CBN News app today.
At a time when America is facing many racial divisions, one group is working to bring about unity, and it's planting churches in minority communities. Charlene Aaron brings us the story.
The Global Church Planning Network, Acts 29, launched the plan in an effort to start and grow gospel-centered churches in Hispanic and urban communities, a move that comes at a time when America's Latino population continues booming growth.
Because the Great Commission says go to all nations.
As leader of the initiative, Pastor Doug Logan wants to focus on unity as well as diversity.
What it's going to reflect is God's heart for the lost of all nations. When we begin to reflect that, and we don't have a messianic complex where we think our culture is elevated over other cultures, and we realize we sit under the living God who levels the playing field because sin has leveled us and grace has brought us into family and relationship, we then can begin leading the way in displaying the manifold beauty of the family of God.
After a year of racial stress across America, the movement comes at a most opportune time.
Right now, we're in such a tense situation where everybody is so picky about definitions and words. But as a church and as people of God, we are called to love each other. And that's the way the world will know that we are his people, if we love each other despite our differences.
Pastor Chuy Rodriguez of DC's Redemption Hill Church will head up Acts 29 Espanol.
There is a great need. As we all know, the Hispanic population specifically, which is the area that I'm in charge of, continues to grow in the United States. If I'm not mistaken, in the last census, there were close to 60 million Hispanics in the U.S.
An opportunity, he says, is ripe for the church to reach this community. According to Pew Research, 85% of Latinos share a belief in God, and many are turning to Spanish-speaking churches. In 2019, Lifeway surveyed leaders from more than 200 new Hispanic church works from 14 Protestant denominations. 94% of its leaders were Hispanic.
Almost every single Latino country in the world is represented in the United States, and we have a prime opportunity to teach them, to train them, to disciple them, and to show them the gospel so that they can be light wherever they go.
With help from the Richmond-based Grimke Seminary, Hispanic pastors will be trained in biblical clarity, cultural engagement, and Acts 29 plans to fully support them in the outreach effort. Part of that requires specific reading in each class and pursuing a diverse faculty and staff.
I believe that a partnership between a church planting network and a seminary that is allowing and intentionally having courses for minorities is probably the perfect match for the next generation of pastors.
Pastors focused on leading all to what matters most.
That we want to have an authentic mission and movement to the least, the last, and the lost of any race.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Coming out, the resurrection of Jesus remembered throughout the world this weekend. But what about those who doubt Jesus even existed? What response can be given to them? We're going to hear from two men who've spent decades proving the reality of Christ. We've got the story for you when we come back. Stay with us.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
From Washington, D.C., uncompromising stories, interviews, and analysis from veteran journalists David Brody.
It's a 50-50 deadlock pretty much in the Senate.
Jenna Browder.
Meanwhile, doctors believe the newly discovered California variant is behind a massive wave of new cases.
Ben Kennedy.
He is sworn in as the 46th president.
Bringing you the political news that matters.
We're people who are committed to protecting the most weakest and the most vulnerable.
Watch Faith Nation, weeknights at 6.
Much of the world marked Christ's death on the cross and his resurrection this weekend, but others wonder if the Messiah is even real and the Bible is true. Do they doubt Julius Caesar existed or the ancient philosophers of Greece? Christian historians say there's much more proof Jesus Christ existed and that the New Testament telling of his miraculous story from incarnation to resurrection is indeed trustworthy. Paul Strand spoke with two men who've spent decades proving it so.
Alex McFarland is a leading Christian apologist. If you're wondering, that doesn't mean he apologizes for the faith. It means he defends Christ's history and shows why you can trust it. To get there, he first explains what historians want.
They want eyewitness testimony. They want multiple testimony. They want early testimony. And the fourth is hostile testimony.
As for eyewitness and early, the Gospels Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are by men who either knew Jesus in the flesh or got their facts from eyewitnesses, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, and others. Paul's epistles are written by a man who encountered the resurrected Christ.
We have got the Gospels coming to us from less than 10 years after the cross.
Compare that to the 643 ancient copies of Homer's Iliad, whose authenticity scholars don't question.
But from the time of the writing to the copies we have, more than 500 years. In fact, around 900 years. We've got the Annals of Caesar, which comes to us in several dozen copies. But again, from the earliest copies we have, the time of writing, nearly a millennia, 1,000 years.
Compare that to the main facts about Christ.
The core of Jesus' identity message credentials was in circulation regularly within 8 weeks after the cross.
As for hostile testimony, or at least not pro-Christian, many outside sources wrote of this Jesus.
A worker of wonders, did miracles, claimed to be God, crucified at Passover. The core facts of the gospel, death, deity, and resurrection, just based on ancient Jewish, Greek, and Roman sources, that certainly were no friend to the burgeoning church. That's very compelling to historians because it represents objectivity, that those no friend of the movement also corroborate the core facts of what we know about Jesus.
Will Durant, an atheist most of his life, but possibly the world's most trusted historian, testified this.
The four Gospels are absolutely trustworthy from an historical standpoint.
Durant would say if you reject those,
we would also have to reject 100 other ancient names, the authenticity of which no historian would dream of questioning. Aristotle, Julius Caesar, people that we don't have as much evidence for as we do for Jesus.
Filmmaker Rick Larson finds proof of Christ and the miraculous world around him in a whole different sphere, scientific evidence.
There are two great events in Christianity. There's the incarnation and there's the execution and resurrection. Those are the two great events. And those two things, God chose to leave hard evidence that we can find today and show that they occurred.
In the Star of Bethlehem documentary, Larson found there really was a light in the heavens that guided the wise men to baby Jesus. It was even shown on coins made at the time. The Christquake shows how Larson's crew found in ground, once covered by the Dead Sea, the geologic ripples of the gigantic earthquake that split rocks at the very hour of Jesus' death. It all proves to Larson who God is.
The two documentaries show that the Star of Bethlehem was real, that's the heavens, and that the quake at the cross was real. So he is the Lord of heaven and earth. And he chose to leave enough evidence for us to see those things are true.
The Gospel of Matthew described both the star and quake.
And for both the Star of Bethlehem and for the quake at the cross, the facts we find, hard scientific facts we find are consistent with the record in Matthew.
As for the written record, remember those hundreds of ancient copies of Homer's Iliad or the dozens of Caesar's biographies? Well, many more manuscripts of the New Testament exist.
Fragments, portions, complete New Testaments, roughly 30,000 copies.
And even if we didn't have those,
we could reconstruct verbatim the entire New Testament, Matthew through Revelation, just based on more than 500,000 verse citations by early church leaders that have been discovered.
The trustworthy history in the New Testament finally brought the atheist master historian Durant around.
It is said that Durant became a Christian before he died because he was compelled by the historicity of Jesus.
McFarland's conclusion? A believer does need faith in Christ.
But it's a faith validated and worthy of our trust, our following, and our obedience. Jesus is real.
Real indeed. Time now for your Monday motivation, and I leave you with this message to jumpstart your week. Get up. Just as God raised Jesus from the dead, he is able to resurrect your life, your dreams, and your ambitions. If you're breathing, there is life ahead. You can't fall below the reach of God, and you can't rise above his hand's grasp. Get up today and live. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about any of the stories you've seen here today. You can email us at that address right there at the bottom of your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And, of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Make it a marvelous Monday. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody.